Welcome to the Dr. Mudgil podcast. This is episode 74. Wow, can't believe we're up to 74 already. We are just cruising through April here. It is a beautiful, beautiful spring day out there. A little nippy in the air, but feels good. And flowers are blooming. Leaves are popping up on the trees. It's just feels good. Feels like spring. So this podcast is going to be kind of like a thoughts of the week format podcast. It's been a great week. It's been a busy week. And just, a lot's been on my mind. But really the last day, or last maybe like 15 hours or so, I've been thinking a lot about perspective and how important perspective is. And I'm going to share a story with you guys. And I don't want this to sound angry at all. It comes from a place of love. But it really had me, like I said, thinking about perspective and thinking about how it's important for all of us to keep things in perspective. So, my New York City office is a very, very busy office. And I see, a lot of patients in a short amount of time there. I'm there on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And yesterday was a busy day. And like a lot of small businesses in New York City, and I think really everywhere, many of us are short-staffed. For some reason, it seems that, a lot of folks don't need to work anymore. I don't know, since the pandemic. So it's been very hard to find medical assistants and support staff. And, my team has been working exceptionally hard to deliver super high-quality care to our patients. But, it's tough on them too, right? So I have staff coming from my Long Island office to help me in my New York City office. Then sometimes I have my staff coming from a New York City office to help me in my Long Island office. And we're really trying to make the best of a situation where we're all spread kind of thin. So if you're looking for a job as a medical assistant, by the way, in either New York City or in Long Island, please hit the old doc up. If you can draw blood and you have a good attitude, you will likely be a good fit. So that's just a little plug advertisement for some employees. But that being said, that's sort of the backdrop of this story. So yesterday, my third patient of the day was an elderly guy. He was a guy who came in a wheelchair. He was with his elderly wife. He was in bad shape. He had a spinal fusion, actually, from the top of his neck all the way down to the base of his spine, could barely move. Hadn't been to a dermatologist in, say, like a decade or something like that. And, it's hard for him to get around. He's been through a ton. Very, very nice guy, very sweet guy. But, he's been through a lot. So when I walked into the room, I saw the situation. I was like, okay, this is going to be a longer visit than I anticipated. And my schedule as such, because it's so busy, we squeeze emergencies in and that sort of stuff, it's filled to the gills, right? So then I saw him bust out a notebook with some notes and stuff. I was like, okay, he's got the list, the infamous list. So I took a seat and, I examined him. He came in for skin cancer screening, so I examined him. And then we went through his list. And initially, I could hear the room where I was examining him was like close to the waiting room, and I could hear the crowd swelling in the waiting area. And my office in New York City is very small. I have a very small waiting area. So when it gets busy, it's like it's like standing room only type situation. So, as we were kind of going through his list, running through his issues, I remember telling myself, or just really kind of assessing the situation, said, okay, this is definitely going to take much longer than the allotted appointment time. And, if we go through all of these issues, it's going to throw my schedule way out of whack, like way out of whack. Like I want to be running very far behind for all of like the 20 patients that I had after him, or 20 plus patients I had after him. But then I thought to myself, I was like, you know what? I think this poor guy, it probably took him forever to get to my office. It's probably not easy for him to navigate his way through the city. He's in a wheelchair. He's with his elderly wife who was helping him out. It took him forever to get undressed. It's going to take him a long time to get dressed. It was a big ordeal for him to come to the dermatologist. And he said he hadn't been to the dermatologist in a while. He had a bunch of issues that he wanted to address. And I said, you know what? If this were my uncle or someone, a loved one, then, of course I would do everything I could to, address all of their needs, knowing how hard it was for him to get to the office. So I settled in. I said, let's do this. We went through the list. Happened to be an amazing guy. I really enjoyed meeting him and his wife. But I knew when I walked out of that room, it probably took like 30 or 40 minutes to see this patient who was actually like double booked into a 15-minute slot. So I walked out, see the waiting room full of patients, and I said, okay, we are starting this day off very far behind. But, when that happens, and it happens on occasion, sometimes, medicine is a very, very unpredictable field. You never know what's going to happen. Sometimes you're doing a surgery, there's a complication, it takes you twice as long as you anticipated, or, there's a patient like this that just requires, a disproportionate amount of time just because of the nature of the visit. So I was like, okay, we're short-staffed. We're running very far behind, and I got basically a full day of patients ahead of me, but let's just do it. So we put our, nose down, grinded away, and, went from patient to patient. And when you're in that situation, what I always tell myself is, I always resist any temptation to rush through a visit. Everyone is there to see me. Everyone has their needs that need to be addressed. And I take my time with every single patient, because just because I spend a disproportionate time with one patient doesn't mean another patient should get gypped of whatever, questions or whatever time they need from me. So I just kind of block it out and just go through my day. So, every patient was like just super cool. I mean, I think, the patients that were there while that patient was there just saw like the condition that he was in, and were obviously like very understanding and just got it. They were like, okay, like obviously Dr. Mudgil didn't expect this patient to take as long as he did, but he did, and we're just going to roll with it. Which is, what any sensible person would do. So, we were going through the day. Everything was fine. I had one mom who was like, had a little something to say, but, I always find that as, I use sarcasm and humor. I like to give myself a chuckle in situations like that. So I humored myself with a few zingers while, she was complaining a bit. But like I said, everyone was really great. We got through the day. I think we were running basically like 20 minutes behind, like towards the end of the day. So it wasn't anything terrible. I really do pride my office on running on time as much as humanly possible. Of course, it's impossible to always do that, but we pretty much run on or as close to schedule as possible. Most of my patients are in and out of the office in like 20, maybe 30 minutes tops. So that's typically how we operate. And, of course, there are days where things kind of get out of whack and we run a little bit later, but it's never anything egregious. So my second to last patient of the day was a 12-year-old child who came with her mother. And, I have a very small office. We're very tight. We, my staff and I get along very, very well. We're very close. So my receptionist said, hey, the mom that you're about to see is, she's spicy. She's a little spicy, coming in hot. So, okay, no problem. So she was actually quite rude to my receptionist, and, just wasn't kind really at all, but it's fine. And the other thing is, I know everything that happens, because this happens quite frequently where someone, not quite frequently, but it happens on occasion where someone is like really rude to my staff or my assistants, but they're always very kind with me. But, I see the whole picture, because my staff is very open with me. So I already knew the mom was, a little hot under the collar, let's say. So then my PA, took the patient back, triaged the patient, assessed what the needs were for the visit. She came back and said, hey, the patient's here for such and such, but I'm just going to give you a heads up. The mom is a little bit spicy. So I said, okay. I knew where I was walking into. So I went into the room, and the patient's appointment was at 5:30. They were actually checked in at 5:39. So I think they actually came a little bit after their appointment time. Obviously not a big deal. I was running a little bit late anyways. They were taken back by 6. And just to give you like a whole frame of reference, they checked out at 6:26. So their entire time in my office was from 5:39 to 6:26. That's 47 minutes. So they're in my office for 47 minutes, checked in, seen, had blood drawn, had prescriptions renewed, were examined, checked out, all in the span of 47 minutes, which, to be honest with you, I don't think I've ever been in and out of a doctor's office in 47 minutes. And like I said, I do pride myself on operating much more efficiently than that. So usually a visit like that would take like 20 minutes. But just like I said, because of the nature of the day, it just took a little bit longer than usually. And most of that was, obviously all of that was because I was running a little bit behind from that patient that required a bunch of time earlier in the day. So I walk into the room and I said to the mom, hey, I'm sorry you had to wait. And then I always address my patient, who was the child. And I, just did, it was a quick follow-up, did an active follow-up, just said, hey, how's everything going? This is the plan for the next few months. We got blood work, went over the prescriptions, etc. And then I turned to the mom and I said, actually, I just turned to the mom before I could say anything. She just looked at me and said, that's it? Like, that's what I waited all this time for? I mean, granted, it was 20 minutes. It wasn't a lot of time. And that was the straw that broke the duck's back yesterday. So, going into the situation, like knowing that this woman was incredibly rude to my receptionist, she was incredibly rude to my physician's assistant. I tried to make the best I could of the situation. But when she made that comment, it actually made me realize, like, it was just an instant. Like, literally, it was like a fuse went off. But I was like, wow. I was like, this person, like, really lacks any sense of perspective. So I said to her, I said, ma'am, I'm very sorry. I know you're upset that you had to wait. But let me tell you why you had to wait. I said, my third patient of the day today was a gentleman in his 80s, and he came in a wheelchair. He could barely walk. His spine was fused from the top of his neck to the base of his back. He came to me with a litany of issues, and knowing how long it probably took him to get into the office, to get undressed, to get home, it probably was like an entire day ordeal for this poor man. So he came to me in need, and I was going to do everything I could to help him, because that's what he needed. And I promise you, if you or your daughter came to me with the same needs, the same situation, I would do the same for you. That's just how I operate. Now, if you're upset about this situation, I'm happy to give you this gentleman's phone number, and you could give him a call and complain to him that you had to wait 20 minutes to be seen because I spent so much time caring for him. Obviously, I was being sarcastic, but she kind of looked at me dumbfounded, and I just excused myself from the visit, and hope, whether they come back or not, I don't know if they are going to come back, but it's first of all, 47 minutes isn't that long of a time to be in a doctor's office. Granted, some of my patients are quite spoiled. They're used to getting in and out of the office, and that's my fault. But I didn't think it was anything egregious, to be honest with you. Again, she was checked in at 5:39, out at 6:26. Not so bad to be checked in, be seen, be examined, have your blood drawn, get your prescriptions refilled, and checked out. That's a lot that happened in that 47 minutes. But so things happen in life. There's things that, things don't always go as you intend. So I'm sure in her mind, she wanted to get in at 5:30, be out at 5:45, which honestly can happen on occasion in my office. But, yesterday, it just wasn't one of those days where that was going to happen. But it was like a complete, utter lack of perspective that really drove me nuts. I mean, wouldn't this woman think that, hey, obviously there's a reason why the doctor was running behind, right? Like something must have happened in one of the visits before me that, pushed the schedule out of whack. Obviously, I don't want to be running late. I don't want to be in the office for an extra hour. I want to get home to see my wife and kids, and have dinner with my kids. But that's what I do. Is I'm a doctor, and I take care of patients. And sometimes, like I said, medicine is unpredictable. And sometimes, you can't always control your schedule. Now, I don't know if this woman she probably could care less, right? I mean, not to be disrespectful, her head is probably so far up her ass that she has like no idea and has no perspective and is just like in her own little world. But the reason why I actually said that was for the benefit of her 12-year-old who could still be saved. And maybe she'll realize that, hey, you know what? It's really not that big a deal that I had to wait like 20 minutes to be seen by the doctor. And, listen, during the pandemic, everyone got very, very tense. It was a crazy time in our lives. Things are finally getting back to some semblance of normalcy, but some of that crazy still is, seeping into our current world. And it was just a reminder to me to keep things in perspective. But I think it kind of serves as a reminder for all of us, there's a reason behind anything that's, in your life that may not go the exact way that you have planned, but don't always assume the worst possible scenario, right? Like I said, in this particular instance, had this been either this woman or her daughter that was in the same situation as this elderly man, I would have gone above and beyond to do the best I could to care for them. But in this particular situation, the situation was reversed, and someone else got a disproportionate amount of my time, which sort of had this ripple effect throughout my day. But those are my thoughts of the week. I know it's a long story, I don't mean to sound bitter or angry about it, but these are things that happen in the course of the day of, of all of us, but it's very, very common in a medical office. And I think it's important to kind of put these types of situations in perspective if your doctor's ever running late to see you, because, we're all really just trying to get through the day and do the best we can for each and every one of our patients. So those are my thoughts of this week. I hope you all have a wonderful and restful weekend and just ready to crush the week ahead. Let's get it.